Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second day. We are at VeeamOn 2019 here in sunny Florida, and I am sitting next to Kyle with Learn on Demand. And what brings you down to this side of Florida?
Well, in particular, in my case, it's this side of the world.
Oh, that is true. That is absolutely true.
This is. I come from what I refer to when I come to the US as the deep south.
That is the deep south. It's very true.
So coming over with Learn on Demand system.
Mm-hmm.
So we're the official lab host for all the VMC education part of Veeam. So we had there's some pre-con training that's been running. So we've been running that, hosting all the labs for that.
Gotcha.
So we're here, there, and then here with that, and then this week is obviously just the opportunity to talk to some more of the Veeam folk and go and meet and greet folk. Yeah.
So let's just talk about how you facilitate that learning, because there's a lot of different ways you can learn, right? You can be audio, visual. How do you guys do that? What's your strategy?
So for us, we kind of sit more in the background, I'll be honest.
Okay.
Right? So say for instance, this week was a classroom environment.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got traditional sort of ILT or instructor-led training.
Okay.
There's also virtual-led training, which we can also facilitate.
Mm-hmm.
But what we do is we kind of sit in behind the scenes. So we do the hosting for the content that gives the hands-on experience.
Okay.
So the idea is you go and sit into a classroom or you go and sit in a breakout session or something like that, then really what you're doing is all that you're experiencing is what's being talked at.
Yep.
Right? So instead, what you can do is you can leverage off the hands-on environment, which is not a new thing, and that then gives the students or the attendees the experience of actually going and playing with the product or doing what they've been learned. What we bring to the table is that you don't need to have big machines sitting on the desk. You don't need to have something sitting in the conference room. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you are more, so you're the backend service. So are you working more directly with companies like Veeam rather than directly with the end user?
Yeah, exactly. So we primarily, that's where we've been.
Yeah.
Is working with things like Veeam. We also work with Microsoft. We work with EC Council. Those sort of folk.
Some big companies in there.
Yeah, exactly. So with Tableau recently, we brought on. So we do they develop the content. We also have the option to be able to develop the content for them. But they develop the content, host it on our platform, and we then give them the option to be able to access that at scale.
Okay.
And also it means that, say for instance, for the folk that have been this week doing the VMCE, when they've done the training, traditionally if you're doing classroom training, the access to a lot of the hands-on content stops at the end of the week.
Yeah.
So basically Friday afternoon, everyone packs up and they go home and they've got their books and they've got whatever they can remember out of that. What we offer is the hands-on environment to be able to take with them. So they actually have post access to it.
Okay.
So they can still run that from anywhere in the world.
Gotcha.
For, depending on the customer, anywhere up to about 6 months of post access.
Okay.
So it means that, say for instance, someone going and studying for their VMCE, they want to practice just that little bit before they go and do their exam. They can jump in and do that.
Interesting. So I got to ask a technical question. How do you guys actually host this? Because if you're hosting video and that kind of content at scale, that's not easy.
No. So we have multiple levels that we host at. So we have our own data centers that we operate out of. We host both virtualization platforms for Hyper-V and VMware.
Okay.
And that's driven by whatever the customer requirement is. So there's obviously technical limitations on both platforms. So it depends what the customer requires as to what they're using.
Sure.
We have a lot of the back-end services which are running in either AWS or Azure, depending on what the customer requires. So say, for instance, the orchestration process is all coming through that.
Yeah.
In addition, we also have the ability to be able to host directly into AWS or Azure. So say, for instance, the Tableau conference where we had 5,500 concurrent sessions.
Wow. That's a load.
That's at scale, and that was running in AWS because that was the requirement from the customer.
Gotcha.
So basically, what we do is we orchestrate the startup of the services, so deployment of the VMs into whatever the cloud service is, whether it's private or public, and then orchestrate the other side of it as well, which is the important bit, which is tearing it down.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're talking about public cloud, if you leave something running
you're paying.
Yeah, exactly. So it becomes expensive. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't want to lay the ground for anybody else, people often ask, how can they get on the Petri dish? Well, Kyle happily brought us a bottle of whiskey from down south, and I'm not saying that's a prerequisite, but it definitely doesn't hurt.
Well, I know where to influence.
Oh, and it worked, clearly.
Right. And I know the buttons to press, right?
Yeah. And so that was a delicious treat, and we very much appreciate you coming back. What else is going on in your world? So you guys have been building out the learning infrastructure and all that. We saw you last year here at VeeamOn.
Yeah.
But what's happened since then? What's going on in your world?
So the things that we've seen is that there's been a change in how learning has gone. Because we deal with a lot of learning partners and that sort of thing. So, but we've also seen now that there is a need from, or more of a recognition from other organisations, apart from, say, for instance, the Veeams, the Microsofts and that sort of thing of the world, that people need to know about their product. Mm-hmm. So that's a big change. And we've found quite a good niche now with folk who are wanting to actually develop their own content to be able to demo, say for instance, their own product, which might be more of a customer-facing type thing as opposed to a traditional classroom.
Gotcha.
But instead, you want to be able to see what it looks like. We also have introduced what we call the IT Pro Challenges. Now, what they are is essentially little snippets of testing.
Okay.
But also learning. So we've got different levels of that go from from a beginner level where you're actually stepping someone through an entire process. So say for instance, it might be setting up an Azure VM as an example. So they'll spin up the client or spin up the challenge. That will then give them the steps at how to do it, along with actually a subscription or a part of a subscription to be able to use. So they've got a tenant that's provisioned. The other side of that is you then advance that through, which is rather than giving you the steps to do it, the advanced version says, this is what we want you to do.
Oh, okay. I see. That makes sense.
So you then go do it, and then at the end of it, we give you a result, and that says, yep, you did it, you were successful.
You understand the concepts, and that's neat. Yeah.
And then we're linking that to a badging platform as well.
Okay.
So that then...
Natural.
Yeah, exactly. So, so a bit of a gamification onto it. But we've found, I've got a customer based out of Australia who's actually using that as a recruitment tool now. So as a first line part of recruitment, what they do is they actually send 2 IT Pro Challenges to potential folk that are going to be part of, are going to come for an interview.
Yep.
It does 2 things. It tests to see whether they actually have the knowledge to be able to go through.
Yep.
Obviously, because they've got to do the technical part of it. Not only that, but also testing to see if they'll actually do it.
Sure.
And they've found it's a really good way of weeding out potential candidates.
Yeah.
Because if they send it out to someone, if someone jumps in straight away and does it, they know they're keen. If it takes them 2 or 3 days to get to it, or they don't do it at all, and it's like, well, okay, we're not going to take you to the next level of the interview. So yeah,
it's an interesting tactic, especially when you're trying to vet out people, because we all know the interviewing process is expensive, right? It's a lot of downtime. You're trying to find a right candidate, and to go through that entire process to streamline it from the corporate side, it's a smart move.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were trying to start off with. They actually tried it side by side with a traditional sort of method. So basically, what they did is they sent it out to candidates, but then brought the candidates in. So regardless of what their performance was,
gotcha,
to see if it correlated.
Yeah,
and it was really interesting. It did directly correlate. So they went, oh well, that's a good way to be able to do it. So.
Yeah, it's a good barrier.
Yeah.
Very interesting. If people want to learn more about what you're doing, what's the best place to find you?
So they can go to learnondemandsystems.com. It's the world's longest URL. Or alternatively, they can ping me. My Twitter handle is @WindowsPCGuy.
Okay.
And you can get a hold of me.
Fantastic. And to everybody else watching, thanks for tuning in. There will be a link in the description below so that you don't actually have to remember that. And to everyone else, please bring a bottle of whiskey just like Kyle did, and you'll be right on here next. Thanks for tuning in.